The following will be a podcast interview by Melissa Serrano.
Melissa, why have you chosen to become a teacher, or perhaps it has chosen you? In what ways might you understand teaching as a calling? To what extent might you see teaching as part of your journey in experiencing connection, community, and wholesomeness?
I truly believe that I did not choose to become a teacher, rather, teaching chose me. Growing up, I loved to be a leader. I guess you could say I was rather bossy. I loved to be in charge and create. After high school, I started off college pursuing a career in social work. I knew I wanted to work with people and make a difference. As I continued college, I soon realized that as a social worker, I would not get the hands-on experience working with young people that I wanted. I started working for an after-school program, coaching youth sports. I fell in love. I have always loved athletics, and coaching was truly a passion of mine. I really enjoyed challenging my players, but also allowing them to recognize their strengths. I built a community within my program and gained a lot of praise from the school I worked at. From that point on, I started to get more involved with the school. I volunteered in classrooms and even went on field trips. The teachers trusted my judgment and trusted me with their students. Many of them asked me, "Why aren't you going to school to teach?" I honestly never thought I would become a teacher, but now I cannot see myself doing anything else. I get excited to go to work, and I think that is true happiness. Teaching and inspiring youth is my passion. I plan on using my strengths to be the most effective teacher I can be.
Resiliency may be described as our attempt to deal with a lack of connection, community, and wholeness. Can you recall a time in your own educational or personal experience which required you to demonstrate resiliency? How did you manage to remain resilient?
Well, as I mentioned before, in the past I worked for an after-school program at a middle school in the city of Azusa. In this program, I was in charge of the sports component. I coached for all 3 seasons of sports for both boys and girls teams. My school was the only school that had one coach. All the other middle schools that participated in this after-school program had at least 2 coaches. Because I had experience with coaching and I excelled in classroom management, my supervisor and the department believed I was capable of running the program on my own. I have to say I was extremely honored by this, even though I knew it would be a challenge. I like the fact that I got to run my program on my own. I set my own expectations for my players, and I created my own practice plans. Through this assignment, I had to face many challenges. Oftentimes, my teams did not have enough equipment. There were times that my players could not make it to practice because of other obligations. I had little support from parents at first that made it challenging for me to have consistent participation. Although these were minor setbacks, I had to push through them and continue to build a program that I knew would be effective. I built a community within my teams by praising strengths and creating a family-like environment. My players started to become more comfortable with one another and with myself. My players depended on each other on and off the field. When I finally accomplished gaining a community environment within my teams, I noticed more frequent participation. Parents started to get more involved, but more importantly, my players became more successful on and off the field. Not only were our teams winning games, but they were also performing better in the classroom. I had always set a time during practice for my players to continue to work on homework, and they always worked together. The program was great. We even made it to an all-star tournament, which was an honor. When we arrived at the tournament, we were extremely disappointed. The tournament was poorly organized, which in turn resulted in very unhappy participants, coaches, and parents. My players had a really hard time understanding that I could not do anything about it except voice my concerns. I had to remain calm and professional, although I was extremely upset myself. Instead of making the experience more negative by showing my emotions, I turned this situation into a learning experience for my players. They had to understand that not everything is going to go their way, and even adults make mistakes. I think this was also a learning experience for a lot of their parents because they were not used to having coaches remain so calm but at the same time try to make a difference for their children. I believe I remained resilient during this time with this program because it was extremely challenging from the get go. I had to build the program up from nothing, and as soon as I was satisfied, another challenge came along. I learned so much from those experiences, and I know I can become a more resilient person because of them.
What might be some ways that you anticipate having to exercise resiliency as a teacher? What will you do to help yourself thrive in the role of teacher rather than merely survive? How might your faith intersect with your role as a teacher?
Some ways that I anticipate having to exercise my resiliency as a teacher is when working with special education students. My credential will be single subject and I will be a general education teacher, but I know that I will have special education students in my classroom. I'm going to have to work extremely hard at learning their needs and making sure I am creating the appropriate accommodations and modifications. Besides being knowledgeable of their needs, I am going to have to challenge myself with fitting in curriculum to fit the needs of all my students. I don't want to just present the curriculum in hopes that my students will grasp it. I want to be an effective teacher that makes learning the curriculum fun, and I want my students to understand the importance of the curriculum they are learning. I know that I might also be challenged with little to no parent involvement. This situation is extremely hard because oftentimes students are unmotivated and discouraged. I will need to turn that situation around by either trying to get the parent involvement or working without it. In either situation, I know that I will not always be successful, but in success or failure, I need to learn from my experiences. I think that my faith will intersect with the role as a teacher simply by the fact that I know God will never challenge me with something I cannot handle. I know that God will give me strength to be a resilient teacher and guide me to be an effective teacher. There will always be challenging times when I turn to prayer to help me stay calm and focused.
Have there been any significant cultural beliefs or experiences which have influenced your desire to become a teacher? Has your understanding or experience in matters related to social injustice had an impact on your decision to become a teacher? And if so, how?
I grew up in the city of Azusa and attended Azusa schools from kindergarten till I graduated from high school. Most of my family lives in this community and they have for several generations. My family is very involved with Azusa community and we take pride in our city. The Azusa community is predominantly Latino and low income. All the Azusa schools are Title I schools and sadly do not provide very many resources for their students. Now, I did not know this until I went to work for another school district and did some research. Growing up, I thought everything was great. I thought my teachers were great and so were my schools. When learning that Azusa schools could have so much more, I knew I wanted to help make a difference. My community deserves better teachers, better schools, and more resources. I will start by becoming a teacher and advocate for social justice in Azusa community, and hopefully that will lead me to bigger assignments where I can further my assistance.
How might your current educational philosophy have been impacted by your own educational experience in K through 12, by your experience thus far at APU?
Well, I already touched base on this question in my last answer about K through 12 experiences, but as for my experience at APU, well, they have all been positive. Through learning about multicultural inclusion, I have gained a better understanding on how to create a community within my classroom. I have also extremely enjoyed learning about creating a non-objective classroom environment. All that I have learned at APU thus far will contribute to my educational philosophy.